Welcome to the Suspect Zone. I am your host Miranda Silver-Polensky, where we delve into the darkest corners of true crime and uncover stories that send shivers down your spine. Today, we explore the chilling case of surviving Ted Bundy, the untold stories. Ted Bundy's reign of terror began in February 1974 in Washington, marking the start of a series of brutal crimes that would span across Oregon, Colorado, Utah, and Idaho. His crimes were not just about murder, they were deeply personal and horrifying. Bundy would often revisit the remains of his victims, engaging in disturbingly intimate acts with their bodies, long after death, until nature and wild animals made further interactions impossible. These actions reveal a chilling level of obsession and depravity that leaves us questioning how someone so outwardly normal could harbor such darkness inside. Beyond killing, Bundy was also a prolific burglar, breaking into homes at night, often while victims slept. He would bludgeon, maim, strangle, and sexually assault his victims in their most vulnerable moments, leaving families shattered and communities terrified. The emotional weight of his crimes is overwhelming, families forever scarred, survivors haunted by memories of their terror. How do we come to understand a person capable of such cruelty, hiding behind the guise of normalcy? And how many others might be walking among us, hiding their true faces behind a mask of innocence? Imagine the early years of Theodore Robert Bundy, born on November 24, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont, years filled with secrets, confusion, and emotional turmoil for those who loved him. His family's story was shrouded in deception. He was born at a home for unwed mothers, and to hide the shame, his maternal grandparents raised him as their own, leading him to believe his mother was his sister. When he finally learned the truth in 1969, that his mother was actually his biological mother and that his father's identity remained unknown, something shifted inside him, a lifelong resentment that would shape his future. His childhood was marked by a mix of alleged abuse and disturbing behaviors, cruelty to animals, and a sense of detachment that some experts later identified as signs of psychopathy. His early life was a tangled web of family secrets, emotional neglect, and possible trauma, leaving him isolated and angry. That childhood, filled with confusion and pain, laid the foundation for the darkness that would later consume him. As he grew older, Ted's academic life showed flashes of brilliance, but also signs of instability. He was intelligent but socially awkward, often bullied and misunderstood. His teenage years were marred by run-ins with the law, burglary and auto theft, yet these incidents were hidden away, erased from his record. In college, he was a top student in psychology at the University of Washington, yet he often left abruptly, his mind seemingly elsewhere. His charm and intelligence masked a growing darkness, one he would eventually use to manipulate and prey upon others. Behind the facade of a promising student was a man haunted by unseen demons, a man whose inner torment would soon explode into unspeakable horror. In the most tragic twist of fate, Bundy's relationships were as complex as his life story. While on trial for murder in 1980, he married Carol Ann Boone in a courtroom, an act that stunned everyone. Boone believed in his innocence and supported him fiercely. Their daughter, Rose, was born while he was on death row, a symbol of love and hope amid the darkness. But as Bundy's secrets unraveled, confessing to countless murders, Boone's faith shattered. She divorced him in 1986, unable to bear the betrayal, and she and her daughter disappeared from public life. How could someone so deeply loved and supported by his family be capable of such unspeakable evil? And what does it say about the nature of darkness that can hide behind a mask of normalcy, even from those closest to us? These questions linger, forcing us to confront the uncomfortable truth that sometimes, evil is born from a childhood of pain and confusion, lurking quietly behind a carefully curated facade. Imagine a young boy growing up in a world built on secrets and lies, where the truth about his origins was concealed to protect him from social shame. For the first 3 years of his life, Ted Bundy was raised by his maternal grandparents in Philadelphia, who told him that they were his parents and that his mother was his older sister, an attempt to shield him from the stigma of being born outside of wedlock. But as he grew older, the weight of this deception began to gnaw at him. His memories of those early years are clouded with confusion, sometimes told that a cousin showed him his birth certificate, other times that he found it himself, yet the core pain remained the same, a deep, persistent sense of betrayal. When he finally uncovered the truth in 1969, discovering that his mother was actually his biological mother and that his father's identity was a mystery, it ignited a lasting resentment. He carried the heavy burden of feeling abandoned and lied to, and that pain, hidden beneath a facade of charm, would shape the man he became. How does a child carry the weight of such secrets, and how might that betrayal ripple through a lifetime, fueling the darkness that eventually consumed him? Consider the early life of a young boy seeking comfort and stability within the confines of his grandparents' home, especially his grandfather Samuel, whom he respected and clung to in his search for security and affection. Yet, behind closed doors, a far darker reality lurked. Family members later disclosed that Samuel was a tyrannical bully, someone who beat his wife and even their family dog, swinging neighborhood cats by their tails, acts driven by cruelty and rage. His racist and xenophobic attitudes, meaning he harbored hatred and fear toward people of different races and nationalities, created an environment thick with fear, hatred, and intolerance. Bundy's grandmother was described as a meek woman, obedient and fearful, especially as she underwent electroconvulsive therapy, a treatment for severe depression that involved passing electric shocks through the brain in an attempt to lift her spirits. She was so terrified of leaving her house that she rarely stepped outside in later years. The words racist and xenophobic refer to hatred and fear of those who are different from oneself, often resulting in discrimination or violence. Electroconvulsive therapy is a painful and controversial medical procedure used to treat severe depression by shocking the brain to alter a person's mood. Hearing these words helps us understand the deeply troubled environment that shaped Bundy's early life, an environment filled with fear, violence, and prejudice that left lasting scars on everyone involved. As stories about Bundy's grandparents began to surface, many in Roxborough remembered Samuel quite differently. Some recalled him as a fine man, kind, respectful, and caring, leaving others bewildered by the dark, violent descriptions that had been circulated. One of Bundy's cousins explained, "The idea that Sam was a raging alcoholic and animal abuser was just a convenient story used to justify why Ted turned out the way he did." From their limited interactions, the cousin said, nothing of the sort seemed true. Instead, they remembered Samuel's daughters loving him dearly and holding fond memories of their father. Similarly, Louise's sister Audrey Cowell shared that their mother was unable to leave her home because she had suffered a stroke, not because of any mental illness or cruelty. These contrasting accounts reveal how complex and layered the truth can be, how stories can be shaped by perception, pain, and the desire to understand a troubled past. Beneath the surface of the dark reputation that once shadowed Bundy's family, there are glimpses of love and vulnerability, reminding us that even the most terrifying figures can have moments of kindness, and that understanding the full story often requires looking beyond the surface.
From my perspective as Ted's stepfather, Johnny, I always tried to be a caring and supportive presence in his life. When Louise changed her surname to Nelson and moved us to Tacoma, I believed I was giving Ted a fresh start, a chance for stability and happiness. When we married in 1951, I officially adopted him, hoping that our bond would grow stronger over time. I remember trying to include him in camping trips and family outings, thinking that shared experiences might bring us closer. But despite my efforts, Ted always seemed distant, almost like he kept a wall between us. Later, I heard him complain to a girlfriend that I wasn't his real father, that I wasn't very bright, and that I didn't make much money. It hurt to hear those words, because I genuinely wanted to be a good father figure to him. Yet, I sensed that he carried a lot of pain and resentment, perhaps from feeling abandoned or misunderstood. That made it difficult for us to connect. All I ever wanted was for him to feel loved and accepted, but looking back, I realized that some wounds run deeper than I could see.
As Ted's little sister, I was often afraid of him from a very young age. I remember one horrifying moment when I had just woken up from a nap and looked around my room. To my shock, I saw knives from the kitchen scattered around me, and standing right next to my bed was Ted, only 3 years old, smiling in a way that made my blood run cold. I didn't understand what he was thinking or why he was there, but I knew something was wrong. His disturbing behavior, those strange, frightening moments, made me fear him deeply. I could see that there was something dark inside him, something I couldn't explain, and it made me feel unsafe whenever he was near. Even as a child, I sensed that he was different, dangerous in a way I didn't fully understand, and that fear stayed with me long after those early years.
From my perspective as a neighbor in Tacoma, I remember Ted as a mean-spirited boy who seemed to take pleasure in causing pain and spreading fear. I'll never forget the day I saw him hanging a stray cat from his backyard clothesline, then douse it with lighter fluid and set it on fire, something that still haunts me. It was horrifying to witness such cruelty from someone so young, and it made us all afraid of what he might do next. I also heard stories about him taking younger children into the woods nearby, forcing them to strip, and then terrorizing them, their screams echoing through the neighborhood so loud that no matter where we were, we could hear the fear in their cries. There were even reports of him building makeshift traps around our neighborhood, injuring at least one girl in the process. It was as if he was already beginning to play with danger and pain long before anyone realized how dark he would become. Those memories still send chills down my spine, knowing that such cruelty and violence started so early in his life. In his later years, Ted Bundy's stories about Tacoma seemed to shift and twist, revealing a man eager to shape his own narrative. He told one biographer that he would rummage through trash cans late at night, searching for pictures of naked women, and that he would read detective magazines and crime novels filled with stories of sexual violence, especially those with images of dead or maimed women, feeding his dark fantasies. Yet, in a letter to a crime writer, he insisted he never read such magazines, claiming he shuddered at the very thought. He also described himself as someone who would consume large amounts of alcohol and wander the neighborhood, peering through windows to watch women undressing or glimpse whatever could be seen. Psychologist Al Carlisle believed that these fantasies grew from his early window peeping and obsession with women, a way for Bundy to mimic the powerful figures he listened to on the radio, imagining himself as someone important. His social life was just as contradictory. He claimed to have chosen to be alone as a teenager because he didn't understand how relationships worked, feeling lost in social interactions. Still, he insisted he wasn't a complete outsider, saying he was pretty and not a social outcast, just shy and introverted. During junior high, he endured relentless teasing, being poured on with cold water while showering in privacy, an experience that left scars of shame. But classmates from high school remembered him differently, well-liked, and known, a medium-sized fish in a large pond. His only real athletic pursuit was downhill skiing, which he pursued with enthusiasm, though he stole equipment and forged lift tickets to do so. During high school, he was arrested at least twice for suspicion of burglary and motor vehicle theft, though by the time he turned 18, those charges were expunged from his record. These conflicting stories reveal a young man desperate to control his image, sometimes portraying himself as misunderstood, other times as a manipulator, hiding a dark and fragmented sense of self beneath layers of lies. After finishing high school in 1965, Ted Bundy initially attended the University of Puget Sound for a year, but soon transferred to the University of Washington to pursue studies in Chinese. During his time at UW, in 1967, he formed a relationship with a fellow student named Diane Edwards, known in biographies by various pseudonyms, most often, Stephanie Brooks. Bundy often spoke about her with a surprising tenderness, describing her as the only woman I ever really loved. For a brief time, it seemed as though he had found someone who truly understood him, a rare moment of genuine connection in a life otherwise marked by darkness and deception. Yet, beneath that fragile veneer of love, there was an unsettling undercurrent, an indication of the complex and troubled mind that would continue to haunt his future. In early 1968, Ted Bundy dropped out of college and found himself working a series of low-paying, minimum-wage jobs, trying to find his place in the world. Despite his struggles, he volunteered at the Seattle office of Nelson Rockefeller's presidential campaign, showing an interest in politics, and even served as Arthur Fletcher's driver and bodyguard during Fletcher's campaign for lieutenant governor of Washington. That spring, Diane Edwards graduated and left Washington for San Francisco, leaving Bundy behind. Later that year, after earning a scholarship to study Chinese at Stanford University for the summer, Bundy visited her, holding on to the hope of reconnecting with her. These years were a tumultuous mix of ambition, disappointment, and fleeting moments of connection, an uneasy glimpse into a man whose darkness was quietly gathering strength beneath the surface. In August 1968, Ted Bundy attended the Republican National Convention in Miami, a moment that seemed to symbolize his brief engagement with the world beyond himself. Not long after, Diane Edwards ended their relationship and returned to her family in California, frustrated by what she described as Bundy's immaturity and lack of ambition. Her departure hit him hard, and Lewis later pointed to this breakup as probably the pivotal time in his development, marking a turning point in his life. Devastated, Bundy traveled to Colorado and then further east, visiting relatives in Arkansas and Philadelphia, eventually enrolling for one semester at Temple University. During this period, he often visited New York City, where he became increasingly drawn to pornography. He immersed himself in violent and disturbing literature, trying to cope with the pain of losing Edwards. It was also around this time, according to Rule, that Bundy uncovered the truth about his parentage in Vermont, discovering the secrets about his own origins that would haunt him for the rest of his life. These years were marked by confusion, search for identity, and spiraling darkness, shaping the troubled man he was becoming. In the fall of 1969, Ted Bundy returned to Washington and soon met Elizabeth Klopfer, a single mother from Ogden, Utah, who was working as a secretary at the University of Washington School of Medicine. In Bundy's own narratives, she was known by various pseudonyms, Meg Anders, Beth Archer, or Liz Kendall. Their relationship was tumultuous and complex, lasting well beyond the time Bundy was first incarcerated in Utah in 1976. During their time together, Bundy became a father figure to Elizabeth's young daughter Molly, who was only 3 when they started dating. He remained a significant presence in her life until he was arrested when Molly was 10. As Molly grew older, she later revealed disturbing memories of his abuse and inappropriate behavior starting around the age of 7. She recounted incidents of Bundy hitting her in the face, knocking her down, putting her at risk of drowning, and engaging in sexual touching, all disguised as accidents or games. These revelations shed light on the dark, hidden side of Bundy's relationships and the profound harm he inflicted on those closest to him. By mid-1970, Ted Bundy had begun to channel his energy into a new direction, re-enrolling at the University of Washington as a psychology major. Determined and focused, he quickly distinguished himself as an honor student, earning respect from his professors and classmates. In 1971, he took a job at Seattle's Suicide Hotline Crisis Center, where he met and worked alongside Ann Rule, a former Seattle police officer and aspiring crime writer. Rule would later become famous for writing one of the most comprehensive biographies of Bundy, *The Stranger Beside Me. During that time, Rule saw nothing alarming or disturbing in Bundy's personality. She described him as kind, solicitous, and empathetic, qualities that made him seem like a caring and well-adjusted individual. His outward demeanor masked the darkness that was quietly building beneath the surface, a facade that would eventually unravel as his true nature was revealed. After graduating from the University of Washington in 1972, Ted Bundy became involved in politics, joining Governor Daniel J. Evans's re-election campaign. Disguised as a college student, he shadowed Evans's opponent, former Governor Albert Rossellini, even recording his stump speeches for analysis by Evans's team. Impressed by his apparent dedication and intelligence, Evans appointed Bundy to the Seattle Crime Prevention Advisory Committee. Following Evans's successful re-election, Bundy was hired as an assistant to Ross Davis, the chairman of the Washington State Republican Party. Davis spoke highly of him, describing Bundy as smart, aggressive, and a believer in the system. Despite modest LSAT scores, Bundy's strong letters of recommendation from Evans, Davis, and several psychology professors at UW helped him gain acceptance into law schools at both the University of Puget Sound and the University of Utah in early 1973. These achievements marked a promising, ambitious chapter in Bundy's life, masking the darker path he was slowly carving for himself. During a trip to California on Republican Party business in the summer of 1973, Ted Bundy rekindled his relationship with Diane Edwards. She was amazed by the transformation she saw in him, no longer the restless young man she once knew, but a serious, dedicated professional seemingly on the brink of a promising legal and political career. Meanwhile, Bundy was also continuing to date Elizabeth Klopfer, completely unaware that she and Edwards were both in his life at the same time. In the fall of 1973, Bundy enrolled at the University of Puget Sound Law School and kept courting Edwards, who flew to Seattle several times to be with him. Their relationship grew more serious, and they discussed marriage. At one point, Bundy even introduced her to Ross Davis as his fiancé, hinting at a future that seemed bright and full of possibility. Yet beneath this veneer of ambition and romance, darker secrets lurked, concealed from everyone around him. In January 1974, without warning, Ted Bundy abruptly severed all contact with Diane Edwards. Her phone calls and letters went unanswered, leaving her bewildered and hurt. When she finally managed to reach him by phone a month later, she demanded an explanation for his sudden withdrawal. In a cold, emotionless voice, he simply replied, "Diane, I have no idea what you mean," and hung up. After that, she never heard from him again. Later, Bundy would claim that his motivation was to prove to himself that he could have married her, suggesting a desire to see if he could manipulate her into falling in love with him. However, Edwards, in retrospect, believed that Bundy's intense courtship in late 1973 had been deliberately staged, something he had carefully planned to set her up so he could ultimately reject her, just as she had rejected him in the past. By this point, Bundy had begun neglecting his law school classes, and by April, he had stopped attending altogether. Meanwhile, a series of young women started to disappear across the Pacific Northwest, marking the beginning of a terrifying new chapter in his dark and deadly saga. There's something unsettling about trying to pinpoint exactly when or where Ted Bundy first began killing women. He was inconsistent, telling different stories to different people, always careful not to reveal too much about his earliest crimes. I imagine that for him, these moments were like dark secrets he kept buried deep inside, secrets he refused to share even as he later confessed to dozens of murders with chilling detail just days before his execution. He told Nelson he attempted his first kidnapping in Ocean City, New Jersey, in 1969, but claimed he didn't kill anyone until around 1971 in Seattle. Then, he told psychologist Art Norman that he had murdered 2 women in Atlantic City while visiting family in Philadelphia that same year. To homicide detective Robert D. Keppel, Bundy hinted that he had killed in Seattle in 1972 and again near Tumwater in 1973, after a hitchhiker. Yet, Bundy was always evasive, refusing to give specifics. Rule and Keppel both believed that his murderous impulses might have begun during his teenage years, lurking just beneath the surface. I can't help but wonder what those early triggers were, what dark thoughts or feelings drove him to take such terrible actions, secrets he never truly revealed, secrets that continue to haunt the shadows of his story. Imagine lying peacefully in your bed, the quiet of the night wrapping around you like a safe blanket. Suddenly, everything changes. An intruder breaks into your room, your sanctuary, and in that moment, your world shatters. That's what happened to Karen Sparks Epley on January 4, 1974. She was just a young college student at the University of Washington, full of hopes and dreams, unaware that her life was about to be forever altered by a nightmare she could never have imagined. She recalls the terror as if it happened yesterday. "He came into my home, took a bed frame off of my bed, and smashed my skull," she says softly, her voice trembling with the weight of those memories. The man who attacked her used the broken pieces of her own bed to viciously assault her, causing devastating internal injuries. For hours, she lay there, bleeding, helpless, her mind blank with shock and pain, while her roommate remained unaware of the horror unfolding just feet away. When she finally awoke in the hospital, she couldn't remember what had happened, only a sense of overwhelming confusion and fear. Her recovery was a long, painful journey. The injuries left permanent scars, half of her hearing gone, her vision blurred at times, constant ringing in her ears, and epileptic fits that haunted her for years. Yet, despite everything, she refused to let that darkness define her. She stayed out of the spotlight, choosing to live her life in privacy, quietly carrying the burden of her trauma. For a long time, she kept her story hidden, thinking, women like us, women who've been attacked, who've suffered, we keep our secrets. She wondered why she had to hide her truth, why society taught her to just get on with it. But now she's sharing her story, not as a victim, but as a survivor, someone who refuses to let fear or tragedy control her life. Few knew that her attacker was Ted Bundy, the man who would go on to terrorize the Pacific Northwest, claiming the lives of many others. In Anne Rule's book, she was called Joni Lenz, her story blurred in the shadows of history. But Trish Wood, the producer of Ted Bundy, Falling for a Killer, uncovered the truth. She discovered that Epley had gone on to build a life, becoming an accountant, raising a family, and living with strength and resilience. Epley made a conscious choice. She would not let Bundy steal more from her. She says, "Even though I was victimized, I wasn't a victim." She explains that she never shared her story openly with her children, not because she was ashamed, but because she wanted to protect them. Her focus was on the life she still had ahead, on normalcy, on hope, on healing. "I just wanted to do normal things," she says softly, "to be a normal person. I didn't want to be marked as a victim forever." Her courage, her resilience, reminds us all that even in our darkest moments, there is a strength within us waiting to be unleashed. Her story is a testament to survival, a story that, after years of silence, finally finds its voice.
On January 4, 1974, just past midnight, a darkness descended over Seattle's University District, a darkness that would forever mark the life of 18-year-old Karen Sparks. She was asleep in her basement apartment, unaware of the horror lurking just beyond her door. Suddenly, the silence was shattered. The door to her room was forcefully broken open. A shadow loomed in the doorway, a figure filled with cold intent. Before she could scream or run, he was there, wielding a metal rod torn from her own bed frame. The shock of the blow struck her like a lightning bolt, blinding her with pain and disorienting her mind. She felt the brutal impact, a crushing blow that left her reeling, her world spinning out of control. Then, she was violated in the most horrific way. The same metal rod used to assault her, her body suffering injuries too terrible to describe, internal wounds, her bladder ruptured. Darkness claimed her as she slipped into unconsciousness. She was helpless, vulnerable, trapped in a nightmare from which she would wake only after 10 long days in a hospital bed. When she finally opened her eyes, the pain was overwhelming, her senses dulled, her body broken. Her vision was blurred, her hearing muffled, and the trauma had left permanent scars, her mind and body forever changed. Fear clung to her like a second skin, a haunting reminder of that cold, terrifying night. She survived, yes, but the price was unimaginably high. The trauma etched itself into her very being, her sense of safety shattered, her innocence stolen. Even now, her eyes carry the weight of that fear, her silence a testament to the terror she endured. Just weeks later, in the early morning hours of February 1st, Bundy entered another life, this time that of 21-year-old Linda Ann Healy, a UW student and radio weather broadcaster. She was asleep when he broke into her basement room. The fear in her final moments must have been overwhelming. Blindsided by the same cold violence, she was beaten unconscious. Then, dressed in her clothes, blue jeans, a white blouse, boots, she was carried away like a piece of luggage, her life slipping further from her grasp. Bundy later admitted that he drove her to a secluded area where he raped and murdered her before dumping her body. The chilling truth of his actions leaves a trail of pain, horror, and helplessness, each victim's story a stark reminder of the darkness that lurked behind his seemingly normal facade. The terror they must have felt, knowing they were alone with someone capable of such brutality, is almost impossible to fully comprehend, yet it's written into every scar, every trembling memory left behind. The first half of 1974 felt like a shadow had fallen over the Pacific Northwest, a relentless, terrifying wave of disappearances that seemed to grow more frequent with each passing month. Women, young, bright college students, vanished without a trace, leaving a chilling sense of dread hanging in the air. On March 12, Donna Gail Manson, just 19 years old and a student at Evergreen State College in Olympia, had gone out that evening, excited to attend a jazz concert on campus. She never returned. Her absence left her family devastated, her friends haunted by unanswered questions. Bundy later claimed he had burned her skull in his girlfriend's fireplace, reducing it to the last ash, a brutal act driven by what he called paranoia and cleanliness. But beneath that twisted explanation was a darkness that refused to be comprehended. Then, on April 17, 18-year-old Susan Elaine Rincourt disappeared after an evening meeting at Central Washington State College in Ellensburg, about 110 miles southeast of Seattle. She was on her way back to her dorm when she vanished into the night. The fear deepened when two other women from Central Washington came forward with eerily similar encounters. They reported seeing a man wearing a sling, asking for help carrying a load of books to his brown or tan Volkswagen Beetle, an encounter that, in hindsight, felt like a disturbing premonition of the danger lurking in the shadows. These stories, the disappearances, the strange sightings, created a growing sense of vulnerability among the students and communities. There was an unspoken fear that somewhere out there, a predator was stalking them, hiding behind a mask of normalcy. The sense of safety that once seemed so certain was now shattered, replaced by an unsettling awareness that evil could strike at any moment, leaving lives forever altered and families torn apart. The months of early 1974 seemed to unravel with a chilling relentless certainty, each disappearance another echo of dread that haunted the communities, the campuses, the families. The fear was tangible, suffocating, as if the very air had turned heavy with silence, waiting for the next victim. On May 6, Roberta Kathleen Parks, just 22 years old, left her dorm at Oregon State University in Corvallis, a city 260 miles south of Seattle. She had plans to meet friends at the Memorial Union for coffee, a simple, everyday outing. But she never arrived. Her friends waited, called, searched, but she was gone. Bundy later claimed to have seen her in the cafeteria that day, and he spun a twisted tale of persuading her to go with him to a bar. The next thing she knew, her life was forever altered. He had lured her into his car, tied her up, gagged her, her last moments a terrifying blur of captivity. He drove her back across the state line into Washington, where, in a horrific act, he raped her twice during the journey, her innocence shattered by the nightmare she had been forced into. Less than a month later, on June 1, 22-year-old Brenda Carroll Ball vanished after leaving the Flame Tavern near Burien, close to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. She was last seen in the parking lot, talking to a man with brown hair and his arm in a sling. That man, as we now know, was Bundy. Later, he would tell how he brought her back to his house, where they had a consensual sexual encounter. But that explanation doesn't account for the brutal damage to her skull, a sign of violence that spoke volumes about what really happened. He admitted to strangling her as she slept, yet the injuries told a different, more brutal story, one that hinted at a savage, uncontrollable rage. As the days went by, investigators from Seattle and King County grew increasingly frantic. No physical evidence linked these women directly to Bundy at the time, and their cases blurred into a terrifying pattern. Young, attractive, white college students, their long hair parted in the middle. The common thread was their innocence, their vulnerability, and the terrifying realization that a predator was lurking among them, hiding in plain sight. Fear settled in the hearts of many, a silent, unshakable presence, a haunting reminder that evil could strike without warning, leaving behind a trail of anguish and unanswered questions. On June 11, 1974, the quiet of the early morning was shattered when 18-year-old Jorgen Hawkins disappeared while walking through a brightly lit alley that separated her boyfriend's dormitory from her sorority house. It was a night like any other, normal, peaceful, and then suddenly, everything changed. The next morning, 3 Seattle homicide detectives and a criminalist painstakingly searched that very alleyway, crawling on their hands and knees, hoping for a clue, a sign, anything to explain her sudden absence. But they found nothing. The alley was silent, as if she had vanished into thin air. Later, Bundy confided to Detective Robert Keppel that he had lured Hawkins to his car, knocking her unconscious with a crowbar. He then handcuffed her and drove her to Issaquah, a suburb 20 miles east of Seattle. There, in a brutal act of violence, he strangled her, ending her young life. Bundy spent the entire night with her body, an act of pure, cold depravity that chillingly revealed his callousness. The following afternoon, amid the chaos of a major crime scene investigation, Bundy returned to the alley where Hawkins had disappeared. In a daring and shocking move, he went back to where her earrings and one of her shoes were found, just in the midst of the police gathering evidence, and collected them, leaving the scene as if nothing had happened. His audacity was astonishing. Keppel described it as a feat so brazen that it astonishes police even today. Bundy later admitted that he revisited Hawkins' corpse on 3 separate occasions, each visit a disturbing glimpse into his twisted mind. The brutality of his acts, the calm confidence with which he re-entered the scene of the crime, these actions left a haunting mark on everyone involved and revealed a predator who was terrifyingly unrepentant, operating with a chilling sense of invincibility. Once Jorgen Hawkins' disappearance made headlines, the community was filled with fear and suspicion. Soon, witnesses stepped forward, providing chilling details that painted a disturbing picture. Several reported seeing a man on crutches, with a leg cast, carrying a briefcase, someone who seemed out of place yet strangely calm, lurking near the alley behind a nearby dormitory on the night Jorgen vanished. One woman vividly recalled that the man approached her, asking for help to carry his briefcase to his car, which she later identified as a light brown Volkswagen Beetle. That simple request, innocent on the surface, now takes on a sinister tone, as it fit the pattern of Bundy's method, appearing helpless, affable, but hiding a dark intent. During this period, Bundy was working in Olympia as the assistant director of the Seattle Crime Prevention Advisory Committee. In that role, he authored a pamphlet aimed at empowering women against sexual assault, a stark contrast to the monster he was hiding inside. Later, he moved to work at the Department of Emergency Services, DEA, a state agency deeply involved in the search for the missing women. It was there, amidst the chaos and fear, that Bundy met Carol Ann Boone, a twice-divorced mother of 2 who would become a significant figure in his life. Their relationship blossomed during this time, setting the stage for the final, devastating chapters of Bundy's reign of terror. The irony is haunting. While publicly working to prevent violence, Bundy was lurking behind the scenes, a predator cloaked in the guise of an upstanding citizen. The community's hope for safety was shattered by the chilling realization that the man they had trusted, the man who seemed so normal, had been stalking them all along.
The reports of the brutal attack on Sparks, along with the 6 women who had vanished without a trace, flooded newspapers and television screens throughout Washington and Oregon. The images and stories spread like wildfire, fueling a wave of fear that gripped communities, especially among young women. Hitchhiking, once a common way for students and travelers to get around, suddenly plummeted in popularity. Mothers warned their daughters to stay home, friends looked over their shoulders, and a sense of vulnerability seeped into everyday life. Law enforcement agencies felt the mounting pressure, desperate to catch the killer before more lives were lost. But their efforts were hampered by a shocking lack of physical evidence. Despite their best efforts, they found little to go on: no concrete clues, no fingerprints, no DNA, nothing that could definitively link the crimes to a suspect. Out of caution, police refused to share much information with the press, fearing that revealing details might jeopardize the investigation. Yet, patterns began to emerge. All the victims had disappeared at night, often near construction sites or ongoing work zones. Their last known appearances were usually in casual clothing, slacks or blue jeans, emphasizing their youth and innocence. Witnesses reported sightings of a man wearing a cast or sling, often seen driving a brown or tan Volkswagen Beetle, the same car that would become infamous in this case. These details painted a disturbing picture of a predator lurking in the shadows, someone patient, methodical, and dangerously unpredictable, who stalked the night, leaving behind a trail of fear and unanswered questions. University years. The Washington and Oregon murders culminated on July 14 with the abductions in broad daylight of two women from a crowded beach at Lake Sammamish State Park in Issaquah. 4 female witnesses described an attractive young man wearing a white tennis outfit with his left arm in a sling, speaking with a light accent, perhaps Canadian or British. Introducing himself as Ted, he asked their help in unloading a sailboat from his tan or bronze-colored Volkswagen Beetle. 3 refused. 1 accompanied him as far as his car, saw that there was no sailboat and fled. 3 additional witnesses saw Ted approach 23-year-old Janice Ann Ott, a probation caseworker at the King County Juvenile Court, and watched her leave the beach in his company. About 4 hours later, Denise Marie Naslund, a 19-year-old woman who was studying to become a computer programmer, left a picnic to go to the restroom and never returned. Bundy told Michaud and FBI agent William Hagmeyer that Ott was still alive when he returned with Naslund and that he forced one to watch as he assaulted and murdered the other, but he later denied this in an interview with Lewis on the eve of his execution. With a clearer picture of the suspect and his vehicle emerging, the King County Police took decisive action. They posted flyers throughout Seattle, featuring a detailed description of the man they believed to be responsible, along with a composite sketch that captured the community's growing fear. The sketch was widely circulated, printed in regional newspapers and broadcast on local TV stations, hoping to catch the public's eye and spark recognition. Among those who saw it were Carol Boone, Ann Rule, a Department of Emergency Services employee, and a psychology professor at the University of Washington. Each recognized the profile, the sketch, and the car, and reported Bundy as a possible suspect. But despite the mounting tips, up to 200 a day, the detectives remained skeptical. To them, Bundy, a clean-cut law student with no criminal record, seemed an unlikely culprit. His appearance and background didn't align with the profile of a violent predator lurking in the shadows, and many dismissed the idea that someone so normal could be capable of such brutality. Then, on September 6, a chilling discovery was made. 2 grouse hunters, wandering near a remote service road in Issaquah, found the skeletal remains of 2 victims, Ott and Naslund, just 2 miles east of Lake Sammamish State Park. Among the bones, an extra femur and several vertebrae were later identified as belonging to Jorgen Hawkins. The evidence was mounting, the horror becoming more tangible with each find. 6 months later, forestry students from Green River Community College uncovered even more tragic remnants, skulls and jawbones belonging to Linda Ann Rincourt, Susan Rincourt, Donna Manson, and Brenda Ball, hidden among the dense forests of Taylor Mountain, an area Bundy was known to hike frequently, just east of Issaquah. The victims' remains painted a grim picture of a predator stalking the wilderness, leaving behind silent, haunting clues. Sadly, Roberta Sparks' remains were never recovered, her story forever missing a final chapter. The evidence was undeniable. This was the work of a killer, and the community's worst fears had been realized. In August 1974, Bundy's life took him far from the shadows of Seattle. He received a second acceptance letter from the University of Utah's law school and moved to Salt Lake City, leaving behind Klopfer in Seattle. Despite their distance, he kept in touch with her through frequent calls, but his attention was divided. He was dating at least a dozen other women, each seemingly a fleeting distraction from the darkness he carried inside. As Bundy dived into the first-year law curriculum, for the second time, he was struck by a brutal realization. The other students seemed to possess some kind of intellectual spark that he lacked. The classes, the coursework, everything was incomprehensible to him. He described it as a great disappointment, a blow to his ego and confidence. Instead of thriving, he felt lost, alienated, and increasingly frustrated. Meanwhile, a new wave of violence was beginning to unfold. A string of homicides started in the area, eerily similar yet for a time unconnected. Two of these murders would remain undiscovered for years, hidden in the shadows, until Bundy himself confessed to them shortly before his execution. The pattern was clear. The killer was still out there, and the darkness that had begun in Seattle was now creeping into new territory, leaving a trail of fear, confusion, and unanswered questions across Utah, Colorado, and beyond. Girl Who Got Away, the true story of Ted Bundy survivor Carol DaRonch and her life now. On a bright Saturday in 2018, Carol DaRonch sat quietly, her eyes reflecting a mixture of pain, resilience, and a haunting memory that refused to fade. She spoke for over an hour about the night that changed her life forever. The night when Ted Bundy, already infamous for a string of murders and disappearances, tried to abduct and kill her in Salt Lake City when she was just 18 years old. Her voice trembled as she recounted the terror, the helplessness, and the sheer horror of that moment when a man with a sinister reputation nearly snatched her into the darkness. More than a year after escaping Bundy's clutches, DaRonch, then only 19, faced him in court during his trial for aggravated kidnapping. Her courage was undeniable. Despite the fear that must have haunted her every step, she testified before a courtroom filled with witnesses and media, her words piercing through the silence. She never wavered at all, said retired District Attorney David Yoakum. She knew it was her duty. Her voice was steady, her resolve unbreakable, an extraordinary act of bravery that helped bring Bundy to justice. In 1976, her testimony proved pivotal. Bundy was convicted of DaRonch's violent abduction, the first solid proof of his terrifying rampage across the West, unraveling the web of missing persons cases that had left communities paralyzed with fear. Experts believe Bundy murdered at least 30 women, but he was a master at deception, leaving behind almost no trace of his crimes. He could kill before his victims even realized they were in danger, a predator cloaked in charm and manipulation. In a rare interview in 2019, DaRonch, fiercely protective of her privacy, reflected on her ordeal. She called it the story, a memory she carried but rarely shared in detail. Yet, her words echoed with the raw emotion of someone who had faced the unimaginable. It made me angry, she admitted, to think that he thought he could just take me like that. Her voice cracked with the weight of her feelings, anger, fear, and a fierce determination to survive. I think I couldn't be this shy little girl anymore, she said. I had to learn to stand up for myself. And though she survived what seemed impossible, she confesses, it's still really scary to me that I survived, that I was even able to survive. Her story is a testament to the strength of the human spirit and a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurks in the shadows, yet also of the courage it takes to confront and overcome it. In the late afternoon of November 8, Bundy approached 18-year-old telephone operator Carol DaRonch at Fashion Place Mall in Murray, less than a mile from the Midvale restaurant where Melissa Smith was last seen. Disguising his true intent, he identified himself as Officer Roseland, of the Murray Police Department, claiming someone had attempted to break into her car and persuading her to accompany him to the station to file a report. Sensing something was off, DaRonch pointed out that the road they were on did not lead to the police station. Without warning, Bundy suddenly pulled onto the shoulder and tried to handcuff her. A frantic struggle ensued, during which Bundy inadvertently fastened both handcuffs to the same wrist. Seizing her chance, DaRonch managed to open the car door and escape, her heart pounding with terror and relief. Who Got Away, the true story of Ted Bundy survivor Carol DaRonch and her life now. On a bright Saturday in Utah, in 2018, Carol DaRonch sat for over an hour, recounting the darkest night of her life. The night Ted Bundy, already infamous for a trail of murdered and missing women, tried to abduct and kill her in the Salt Lake City area when she was just 18 years old. Her voice trembled as she reflected on that terrifying moment, saying, it's still really scary to me that I survived, that I was even able to survive. Her escape was nothing short of miraculous, a testament to her strength and quick thinking. More than a year after her harrowing ordeal, DaRonch confronted Bundy in court during his trial for aggravated kidnapping, standing firm as a young woman who refused to be silenced by fear. She never wavered at all, said retired District Attorney David Yoakum, who prosecuted her case. She obviously didn't like the idea of testifying, but she knew it was her duty. Her bravery helped secure Bundy's conviction in 1976, the first proof of his savage rampage across the West, exposing the web of terror he had woven. Though Bundy was a master at leaving little trace of his crimes, DaRonch's testimony was a rare beacon of truth. Her story gained renewed attention when she shared it on the Netflix docuseries Conversations with a Killer, the Ted Bundy tapes in January 2019. She represents that rare person who was able to get away, said director Joe Berlinger. I thought it was very important for people to understand the horror of who this guy is and how he is a master deceiver and manipulator. Berlinger added, he generally was able to kill people before they even knew what was going on. Duranche's courage stands as a powerful reminder of resilience, her survival a beacon of hope amid the darkness. That night in November 1974, young Carol Duranche's life took a terrifying turn that she would carry with her forever. As she shopped at a mall in Murray, Utah, Ted Bundy approached her under the guise of authority, a lie he had used with many other victims. He claimed to be a police officer investigating a break-in of her vehicle, flashing a badge to appear convincing. Describing that evening years later, Duranche explained she only wanted to help, willing to cooperate with an officer. She wasn't swayed by Bundy's appearance or charm, qualities that would later fascinate the media, fascinated by his sinister duality. She remembered him as kind of creepy, noting he looked much older than his actual age, and she could smell alcohol on his breath. From behind bars, Bundy later admitted he often drank heavily before killing. Once they were inside his car, Bundy's true nature emerged as he struck her, and the fight for her life erupted. With every ounce of strength she had, Duranche fought back fiercely, her survival a testament to her quick thinking and resilience in the face of evil. Carol Duranche later reflected that her survival that night was pure luck. Bundy had tried unsuccessfully to handcuff both of her wrists, and she had refused his suggestion to put on her seatbelt as they drove about half a mile away from the mall. Despite Bundy wielding a crowbar and brandishing a gun, Duranche fought back with everything she had. I was able to open the door on my side and get out, and he came out after me over the seat, and we just fought outside of the car, she recounted with a mixture of relief and resolve. On the side of the road, Bundy attempted to bludgeon her into submission, but in that critical moment, Wilbur and Mary Walsh approached in their car from the opposite direction. Hysterical yet determined, Duranche saw her chance, her only hope for escape. That's when I broke away, she said. She leapt into the passing vehicle, her wrists still cuffed, with Bundy's handcuffs dangling from her wrist. Unbeknownst to her at the time, Bundy, thwarted in that murder attempt, would later go on that very night to a nearby high school, where he murdered 17-year-old Deborah Kent. Her mother, Belva Kent, later told People, Duranche was the lucky one, emphasizing how much she suffered but also how blessed she was to survive, testify, and help bring Bundy to justice. Looking back, Carol Duranche describes her feelings about testifying against Bundy not as tearful or fearful, but as a driven sense of purpose. She recalls being totally happy to do it, driven by the knowledge that the sentence he received, 15 years for kidnapping, was nowhere near enough for what he had tried to do to her. I thought, this monster tried to murder me, and he might be out in 2 years, she explained. I thought, I will go and help them get a murder conviction and have him put away. Her resolve was unwavering, she believed it was crucial to stand up and testify, knowing her voice could make a difference. That pivotal day in 1976, when a quiet teen, still largely unknown to the world, faced Bundy just feet away, was replayed countless times in her mind until his death sentence in 1980. After his conviction in Utah, Bundy was extradited to Colorado to face charges for the murder of Karen Campbell, a young nurse from Michigan. Duranche traveled to Aspen to confront him once more. By then, Bundy had become his own defense attorney, and he used that opportunity to cross-examine her. He was so arrogant, she recalled, her voice steady but tinged with disdain. I just think he thought he was going to get away with everything. Despite the trauma, her courage in that courtroom helped unravel the twisted web of Bundy's crimes and ensured he faced justice. It was quite a confrontation in the courtroom, recalled prosecutor David Yoakum, vividly describing a tense and dramatic moment when Bundy, in his manipulative manner, questioned Carol Duranche. How can you be sure it was me that night? Despite the intimidation, Duranche responded with unwavering certainty, telling Yoakum, I would never forget your face. She later reflected, I surprised myself with the strength I had to get through all that, acknowledging that her resilience was bolstered by the support of those around her. Yet, even with her bravery, her efforts alone couldn't prevent Bundy's audacious escapes. He managed to slip out of custody twice, the second time for more than a month, during which he traveled to Florida and murdered 2 college students and a 12-year-old girl. When Bundy was charged with those crimes, Duranche, driven by a sense of justice and vengeance, headed south to confront him once again. My relationship with him was purely to make him pay for what he had done, she said, her voice steady with the resolve that had carried her through her darkest hours. Her unwavering determination played a crucial role in ensuring Bundy faced the consequences of his brutal crimes. Despite the relentless curiosity from others, often asking if she'll always be known as the girl who got away, Carol Durant emphasizes that Ted Bundy occupied only a small space in her life. Throughout his various prosecutions, she made brief appearances in court, but otherwise, her life moved forward naturally. I was able to detach myself from an event that could have ruined my life, she shared, explaining how she found a way to heal. It may not be a reasonable solution for everyone, but it is how I have been able to move on. Aside from an early incident shortly after her kidnapping, when a magazine seller approached her in a grocery store parking lot, she said no lingering terror remained. She became more cautious around strangers, more aware of her surroundings, and less trusting, but Bundy didn't take up space in her mind or dreams. Her trials and court appearances were mere pauses in her journey toward normalcy, which included night classes in business management and weekend lake trips with her boyfriend. She earned a degree in business management and has worked in the telecommunications industry for years, where she met her partner, Michael. At the time of her interview with People, they lived together in the same Utah area where she had once been approached by Bundy, now living peacefully with her family. Even reliving it now, I'm not entirely comfortable, she admitted. I enjoy my anonymity when I have it. I also realize that it is an important story to tell, and if someone can benefit in a positive way from it, then that's what I want. Her journey is a testament to resilience, a reminder that even the darkest experiences can be transformed into a source of strength and hope. Carol Durant credits her son, Levi, with encouraging her to share her story on the Netflix series. We both agreed that I had an important story to tell. It needed to be heard again, she explained. For her, speaking out about her encounter with Bundy is more than just recounting a traumatic event, it's a way to ensure the victims are remembered and that the truth is acknowledged. Outside of these conversations, Durant leads a quiet, fulfilling life. She loves the nearby mountains and lakes. I'm just minutes away from all the major ski resorts, and appreciates Utah's 4 seasons. She spends her time golfing and enjoying the outdoors, feeling really happy and healthy in her daily routine. Since the release of the Ted Bundy tapes in January 2019, the positive support from friends, family, and even strangers at her local coffee shop has been overwhelming. This encouragement inspired her to create a Facebook page dedicated to Bundy's victims and other cases, helping her keep their memories alive. Yet, despite her strength and resilience, she admits, it is still hard for me to talk about his victims and their families. Bundy destroyed a lot of lives, and I came so close. Her story continues to serve as a powerful reminder of the enduring impact of evil and the importance of remembering those affected. Later that evening, Deborah Jean Kent, a 17-year-old student at Viewmont High School in Bountiful, 20 miles, 30 kilometers, north of Murray, disappeared after leaving a theater production at the school to pick up her brother. The school's drama teacher and a student told police that a stranger had asked each of them to come out to the parking lot to identify a car. Another student later saw the same man pacing in the rear of the auditorium, and the drama teacher spotted him again shortly before the end of the play. Outside the auditorium, investigators found a key that unlocked the handcuffs removed from Durant's wrist. Bundy eventually admitted to abducting Kent and keeping her at his apartment for a day, stating she was alive during half of it. In November, Klopfer called King County Police a second time after reading reports that young women were disappearing in towns surrounding Salt Lake City. Detective Randy Hergesheimer of the Major Crimes Division interviewed her in detail. By then, Bundy had become a prime suspect in the case, but the Lake Sammamish witness considered most reliable by detectives failed to identify him from a photo lineup. In December, Klopfer contacted the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office again, reiterating her suspicions. Bundy's name was added to their suspect list, but at that point, no credible forensic evidence linked him to the Utah murders. In January 1975, Bundy returned to Seattle after his final exams and spent a week with Klopfer, who chose not to tell him that she had reported him to police 3 times. She even made plans to visit him in Salt Lake City in August. Question. Do you think Klopfer's repeated warnings could have prevented Bundy from continuing his crimes, or was he already too dangerous to stop? That's a thought-provoking question. In my view, Klopfer's repeated warnings showed her awareness of Bundy's suspicious behavior and her genuine concern, but whether her warnings could have prevented his continued crimes is uncertain. Bundy was extraordinarily cunning, manipulative, and dangerous, someone who concealed his true nature very effectively. Even if authorities had acted more swiftly or if her warnings had been taken seriously earlier, Bundy's ability to deceive and evade capture might have still allowed him to carry out his crimes for some time. However, her persistence and bravery in reporting him multiple times might have at least limited his opportunities or delayed his actions, potentially saving lives. It underscores how crucial early warnings and vigilant community awareness can be, but given Bundy's sophistication and the limitations of law enforcement at the time, it's difficult to say definitively whether her efforts alone could have stopped him entirely. On March 15, 100 miles northeast of Snowmass Village, Vail ski instructor Julie Lyle Cunningham, aged 26, disappeared while walking from her apartment to a dinner date with a friend. Bundy later confided to Colorado investigators that he approached Cunningham on crutches and asked her to help carry his ski boots to his car, then clubbed and handcuffed her before sexually assaulting her at a secondary site near Rifle, 90 miles west of Vail. Weeks later, he made the 6-hour drive from Salt Lake City to revisit her remains. Question. What does Bundy's act of revisiting Cunningham's remains reveal about his psychological state and his need for control or gratification? Bundy's act of revisiting Cunningham's remains suggests a complex and disturbing psychological state. It indicates that he may have experienced a need for continued control, dominance, or gratification even after the crime was committed. Revisiting the remains could reflect a compulsive desire to reassert power over his victims, to relive the act, or to find a sense of closure, though, in his case, it was likely a manifestation of his deep-seated need for domination and his inability to fully detach from his crimes. This behavior underscores the extent of his psychological pathology, revealing that his actions were driven by more than just impulse. They were part of a compulsive pattern rooted in a need for control, validation, and perhaps an obsessive fixation on his victims.
Denise Lynn Oliverson, a 25-year-old woman, disappeared near the Utah-Colorado border in Grand Junction on April 6 while riding her bicycle to her parents' house. Her bike and sandals were discovered under a viaduct near a railroad bridge. According to Bundy, he abducted Oliverson, killed her in his car near the Utah state line, and dumped her body into the Colorado River. His confession was corroborated by gas receipts showing he was in the area on the day she went missing. Later, Bundy also targeted a 12-year-old girl, Lynette Dawn Culver, whom he lured into his vehicle and murdered in Idaho. How can law enforcement agencies improve their coordination and evidence sharing to prevent serial offenders from continuing their crimes across